I said, thank you. You just saved me $400. And I said, I'll buy a little refrigerator to put in the corner. Okay. How far, do you know how far he got yesterday?
Yeah, but we're gonna go back.
Yes, because we're only like 2/3 of the way down. What are we up to today?
Today's daf is supposed to be cuff.
Okay, fine. So, so that we that's what we did yesterday. All right, fine. Okay.
I'm just gonna go.
It's not so terribly difficult.
Okay.
I'll give him this.
Okay, we don't.
Here.
Okay, gentlemen. I want to start with our sponsors. We want to also thank Gary Schrager, Chairman of the House Committee, and Mr. Muggen Juice for their arrangements, okay, for this morning as well.
Boy, you really contract his first name.
No, Muggen is his first name.
I know, but it's like,
And
I thought it
Juice
was
is his
longer
last
than
name.
that. I know Juice is his last name.
Yeah,
But I thought his first name was longer than.
no, it's pronounced as like we would say Muggen.
Okay, because it's got about 43 letters.
Okay, is there enough seats?
No.
No?
You got 3 standing, 5
If you
standing.
got 2 more people coming, you have no money.
We got 5 standing and 3 seats.
I don't know.
Another space, that's all.
Maybe I'll do
We
that.
can expand it up.
This is really inadequate space.
So we should go to the other library.
What's wrong
Try
with
to
the
give you
library?
55 cents to the new library.
That's
Paying
a,
members.
that's a story for another.
We are paying members.
That has,
Anybody here on the board?
You were.
no, he's not
I'm
on
not,
the
he's
board.
not. I think we should look to get the library. It's a big, comfortable space.
What, the library? No,
What would they?
okay. All right,
Well,
who's
that's
sitting?
another point. I don't know about that.
Okay, is somebody's between you guys there, right? Somebody's there. Okay,
As long as Zev has a seat, it's good.
who's next to Marvin and Owen? Is there? Oh, Sid, okay. All right, I'll speak to Gary again. I do want us to say that when I requested that we try to have something on this, on the first floor, the question of the new library did come up. Okay, it was not Gary's, Gary was overruled
By whom?
by the president.
Oh, okay. Why does he unilaterally make decisions?
Dai Hakima Baramiza. Shtika Kahoda Adam. Okay, you know what that means?
Yes.
I know you do. That's why I said. Okay,
That's why I quit. A part of.
okay, gentlemen, please.
No.
The year of learning, Sue and Arnie Garlick in memory of Malcolm Perlman and Philip Mann, Yisrael David Ben Arad, Tzvi Hirsch,
Yes.
Harold Ben Hirsch, Yosef Meir Ben Arav, Tzvi Hirsch Ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah Bar Ephraim, Yisrael David Ben Arav, Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim Ben Arav, Tzvi Hirsch, Shadia Bar Harav, Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam Bar Harav, Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel Bar Harav, Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom Ben Arav, Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov Ben Arav, Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel Rav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel Ben Arav, Tzvi Hirsch, Leslie and Gail Kaplan in memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Sedell Irving and Pearl Kaplan. Sorry. children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of Toby Paris, Saratova, but Yisrael Dov in her memory. Charlie Gelfenstein and Sam Levine in memory of Ramona Levine, Rachel Mata Bat Asher. Friends of Nina Monester, Nakama Asna Bat Yitzhak Aharon. Many friends of Stephen Vigdor, Zecher Nishmat Simcha Melech B'Meir Leib Halevi. Friends of Marcy Kurtz in memory of her great niece, Leah Bracha. Month of learning by Lydia and Abe Krause's many friends in honor of their 50th anniversary. Jill and Perry Meltzer in memory of her father, Yaakov Ben Yosef. A week of learning, Charlie Gelfenstein and Sam Levine, in memory of Charlie's wife and Sam's sister, Menucha Sarah Bad Yechiel Michal, and in memory of Sam's mother and Charlie's mother-in-law, Zissel Bad Yehoshua. Leslie and Gail Kaplan in memory of his mother, Pesha Bat Shmo Yitzchak Halevi B'Tzipora. Andrea and David Dolney in memory of her mother, Sina Bat Shimshon. Minnie Shavrik in memory of her husband, Yeshayahu Ben Nechemiah Mordechai. We have a day of learning today being the 28th, right? Is that, today is the 27th. Okay, so there is none.
You give him 2 days.
We'll do that tomorrow, okay? That's there are 1, 2, 3 on tomorrow. Okay, so there is none other than today. May the neshamas have an aliyah, crank or feel velti yeshua shematzliya. L'chol b'nei Yisrael good geben shtia.
Okay.
Okay.
What's the story with that?
What?
The sick person?
I haven't heard anything further. Okay. And we're learning for the Refuah Shlema for Yosef ben Shoshana Esther. Okay. All right. So
Sick person.
on the bottom of Yud Tet Amud Beis. Okay. Just quick to get us reviewed into the today's daf. All right. So we're talking about this whole question of right, a few items. All right, so the Gemara says, Yativ Rav Menashe Bar Zavid, Kame de Rav Huna, about 5 lines up. Yativ Kamar, my Tama de Rabbi Shimon, my Tama de Rabbi Shimon. Why are you asking what's Rabbi Shimon's reasoning? Kida Amar Tama Hoil Uba Umatza Beheter, V'lo Amda Alav Sha'achat Be'isur. He's talking about the newborn, right, the third brother. Elamai Tama de Rabbanan. Rather, we should ask, what's the reasoning of the rabbis? Amar Kra, got a pasuk, V'lakcha lo leisha, okay, v'yabma, okay, that he should take her as a wife, which implies it's just like regular marriage, and then do.
It's also called the
right, Adayan v'yibumim harishonim ala, right? So that's the point. So therefore, but since we've got the phrase yibama, that would seem to imply that she remains in a status of what we'll call for the moment a Yabama wife. Okay, so do we consider her a real wife like any other wife?
with no prehistory.
Whatever, or do we consider a Yabama wife because even though, all right, let's say the second brother performed with her, what? Okay, that was still originally from the first brother, and so she has this nickname, so to speak, Yabama wife, okay, and makes her somewhat of in a different status, even when she marries, or even when the third,
Mrs. Reuven.
even in that case, by the third brother, right? Okay, right? Ki adayin yibumim harishonim aleh. Why? Because she was really the Yibum from way back from Reuven, the first oldest brother, right? Elahad Tznan Kansa, but here it's taught Kansa. He brought her in other words, he married her. Harehi Keishto Lechol Davar. That therefore, based on that, right, she should be considered normal wife, in quotes. Okay. l'chol davar. As opposed to a co-wife,
Oh, okay.
or as
Well, no,
opposed
she's
to,
a co-wife.
she could be a
She
co-wife.
has to be, because we
Right.
got her co-wife in the story.
Right, that's according to, assuming that Shimon was married
But in
already.
any event, I'm
Okay.
telling you.
Va'amar Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. So Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, all right, is going to now introduce us to our new piece as we roll over to today's daf, which is actually harder than yesterday's. Okay, Shemigarsha Beget Umachzira. That what happens? He brought her in. Yes, he married her. He did yibum with her, whatever it was. Okay, but then he divorced her with a get, and then took her back. And since he wasn't a Kohen, number one, and number two, nobody else married her in between, right? He can be machzer here and bring her back in, all right?
Well, he would want to.
Well, it depends what she looks like. Hatam, she's younger, all right? Hatam nami lema. There too, we might say as follows: V'yibma. But our pasuk also said she's still in a status of yibama. No, she remains in that status of yibama, right? Adayan yivumim harushanim aleha. That still she has this
status of the
status
first
is a good
husband.
word.
Then he would be from Yibam to the same woman twice.
No, he married her through Yibum. His other wife complained, I don't want her around. He got rid of her. Then he talked the other wife into bringing her back.
That could be innocent. But the implication is the Gemara is telling us she still has the, I don't want to use the word scent, but that's the word that comes to my mind. She still has the status, the reputation, okay, whatever term we want to use. History, okay, that she was, remember, still the Yibum from the first.
From Shimon,
But
from Reuben.
what legal change does that imply? A reputation gives us.
No, it
we'll
affects
see.
how it affects
See.
little Levi when Shimon kicks the bucket.
Okay, we're going to see in a moment, is she considered, right? So this is the second line in Kaf Amud Aleph. Adayin Yibumim Harishunim Aleh. Okay, that's what the Gemara is telling us. Okay, in other words, the community knows, so to speak, that she's in that status. Okay, okay. Right.
The Zika that she really originally had from Reuben never goes away.
That's exactly correct.
That's precisely
That's
that.
exactly. If you
Okay.
hold like this,
All
that's
right.
exactly correct.
That gets back to the whole question we had the other day.
The strength of Zika.
Right. V'tebaye chalitza. So let's require chalitza in that case, is the Gemara. Okay? Shani hatan. But it's
For
different there. Okay? We're talking about still now focusing on the third brother, whatever name we give him. The Amar Kra. Why? Because the pasuk says, V'lakcha lo leisha, that he takes her as his wife, which would again seem to imply from the pasuk, right, that her status should be like a regular normal.
In every regard.
Right.
meaning that
Kevan
they-
shelakha, says the Gemara, as it spells it out for us. Ne'aseit ki ishto lechol davar. Okay, right, that she's as if she is, there should be extra chairs around. Okay, that she's like a wife for all purposes. Nami. Okay, so the davar, ihachi hachanami. If that's the case here too, says the Gemara. All right, so now we're still dealing now. Here in the case of the new brother, I'm going to say, right, whatever his name is, Katav Rachmana v'yabma. But here the text says v'yabma, which would seem to imply she still has this Yabama reputation, right? Umareita. So what do you see? In other words, what can we say here? Mistabra. This seems logical. Namely, Shade Hatera Ahatera, identify or place what is permitted in regards to what's permitted. Vishade Isura Aisura, and apply what's prohibited to what's prohibited. Okay, in other words, apply certain things to the part of the pasuk that says "V'lachal isha," and apply other things to the part that
Because
says
the pasuk had seemed to have
Right.
two clauses.
Okay. All right. So that's the point. Ula Rabbi Shimon. And what about this view of Rabbi Shimon? Right? The Amar, who says, Ho'il uba umatz'a beheter, v'lo amda alav sha'achad be'isur. Since he, so to speak, when he was born, she was in a status of
She was
mother.
already Shimon's wife.
She was Shimon's wife, right there, and therefore she was not be in a status of right,
Of Reuben's
right,
wife.
of being the Yabama from Ruvain. Okay, Ela me'ata, but from now, at this point, achoto me'imo shenasa achiv me'aviv v'achar kach nolad ach. This seems similar, Rabbi Shimon would argue, to a situation where the paternal brother, all right, achoto me'imo, all right, I'm sorry,
Maternal brother.
maternal brother, shenasa achiv, the sister of the maternal, of his mother, in other words, his maternal sister, shenasa achiv me'aviv, married his paternal brother. Okay? And if you're using Art Scroll, you need to look at 20A1 number 6 for the diagram. Okay? That he shows it all out there. Okay, it only took me 15 minutes to completely
To figure
understand
that out.
that diagram. Okay? All right. So what happens? All right. So we're saying the maternal sister married his paternal brother. Okay. V'achar kach nolad ach, and afterwards a brother was born. Okay. Umeit, and the mace refers to the
The
paternal,
the dead brother who married the sister.
the paternal brother is who the mace refers to. Okay. Ho'il uba umatza beheter, since he finds her then in a status of heter, all right? Okay, what happens then? Okay, I'm trying to look at my notes. Okay, right, what happens? Isur achoto, right? Lahechan azal.
What happened to his fact? That
What
she's his
happens
sister?
to the fact that we have a clear prohibition that since she's his sister, we have that as a prohibition, and therefore, how can he do any sort of yibum with?
Or chalitza? She's
Okay,
free.
so now the Gemara goes on and tells us, Hachanami isur achiv shelo haya ba'olam hechan azal. Okay, and here too, we might also raise the question from the laws of yibum itself. We're saying that if you're going to argue she still has yibum status,
No,
was-
if you're gonna say she doesn't, what happens to the fact that she really does?
she really does. Well, she would have yibum status from the first
From the
brother,
first husband.
from
How do you?
from Reuben. How do you get? It would
How do you-
imply that you're getting rid of that
Yeah,
rule,
you're ignoring
which is
this.
part of the regular rules of yibum, where we say the brother, not a non-existent brother,
Makes
Okay.
us.
is the issue. Okay. Hi, in this case, Isura delete lehetera. We have a prohibition, namely achot, ach, right? We have that prohibition in which there is no
Never
opportunity for a permission. Hi, in the other case, Isura de'it lehetera. We have a prohibition where there can be a
I had to,
heter given to that situation. Okay?
because when a brother's wife you can't be with, but
Right.
if the brother dies, you
The
have
brother's
to be with.
Right. So in other words, in that latter case, it would seem to imply that yibum would override.
And so the conclusion is that she does not walk around with a name tag, Yavama.
Right. She's just considered his regular wife. All right. our new Mishnah. And as I start in the Mishnah, we'll go through it. But I had a question when I was preparing, okay? And I'm just throwing it out if we have time to discuss it. And that is, notice as we begin this Mishnah, it says, Klal Amru Biyabama. Why didn't this start the whole Masechet? Was what bothered me. If you're going to give a general principle by which we're going to say the operation, so to speak, of Yibum progresses, then and why are we saying it as the second Mishnah in the second parak?
Because
And
Rebbe
not-
felt you needed the whole first parak to illuminate this Mishnah.
Okay, we'll see. Okay, that could be a very good answer. Okay, we'll see if we're all satisfied with it. Okay, all I'm suggesting is that was the question that came to mind. Okay, so as we start this new Mishnah, we see already it starts with Klal Amru Biyabama. Okay, number one, Kol Shehi Isur Erva. Whenever we have a prohibition regarding erva, we know what that is. Okay, and remember, we wouldn't have learned that in a sense had we not had the very first parak, which listed that. But I still found that problematic. All right, those 15 as opposed to the 21. Okay, lo choletzet velo mityabemet. Okay, in those situations, there's neither chalitza nor yibum. Okay. Second point, isur mitzvah v'isur kedusha. When we have a prohibition that is based on a mitzvah, which will be explained later, or an isur, a prohibition based on kedusha, on sanctity, which will be explained later. Okay,
Twice.
all right. Choletzet. In those situations, we don't have a choice between chalitza or yibum. We only have one act to perform. One has one act to perform, namely chalitza, and not yibum. Okay, we go on. Achota shehi yavamta. A situation where his sister is his yibama. Choletzet omit yabemet, says the Tana. All right. She then in that situation, okay, one can do either chalitza or
No, not his sister.
all right. Achota,
Not his
her
sister.
sister. Right. Achota, her sister.
Who's her?
Two sisters are
Okay.
Yavamas.
Two sisters are married to two brothers.
Reuven and Shimon are in a
Right.
car crash together. Their spouses are
You've got
sisters.
two widows that are sisters.
Right.
Okay.
So
So
you
they
get,
take-
according to this, you get to pick one.
You choose one, and the other, as
other
the
goes
co-wife goes free.
No,
Okay.
but wait, the two sisters were married to the one.
Reuven and
two
Shimon are
brothers.
married
Two
to
brothers.
Rachel and
Two
Leah.
brothers.
Yeah.
They die simultaneously.
Two brothers.
Three, when did he have?
Okay.
Okay.
After this?
All right.
Four brothers, two here and two here.
Two brothers married to sisters.
Let's just say three brothers to make it simple. Yesterday I don't, well. Isur mitzvah, now we get the clarification. We said when it was a prohibition based on a mitzvah, okay, what would be an example? Shniyot midivrei sofrim. Those are secondary erva prohibitions that are defined by Chazal.
God
Okay.
didn't pick them. They
Okay? Isur Kedusha. What do we mean when we said a prohibition based on sanctity? Right? For example, those are cases, I'm going to advance the statement, where there is a specific lav involved. Okay, a single lav, but that lav is not a korate punishable lav.
it's just a law.
Right? Almana lekohen, like the following examples. Almana lekohen gadol, a widow to a kohen gadol,
No, the widow of the Kohen Gadol
widow's brother. Okay, right? Grusha v'chalutza lekohen hedyat, divorcee or a chalutza to a common kohen. Okay, mamzeret unetina Yisrael, a mamzeret or a netina, which we'll define shortly. Okay, to a regular Israelite. Ubat Yisrael lenatin umamzer, or a Jewish woman Israelite to a natin or mamzer. Okay, mamzer, we all know the definition. Natin, remember, were those who were declared
Maybe they're Jewish, maybe they're not.
okay, water carriers, okay, because they secretly were involved in trying to get an okay, to be part of the Jewish people. Okay, Gemara. So the Gemara starts off with asking our question, Klal atuyemai, this general principle to include what? Amar Rafram Bar Papa, he argues, La tuye tsarat ilonit, to include the co-wife of an ilonit.
Who was not known
Okay,
when they should marry.
right? And what happens is, remember, we've said all along, he could have married her when she was a minor, okay, but doesn't really discover that she's an ilonit till she's teenage years, so to speak. Okay, Ukeda Rav Asi, and like the view of Rav Asi, right? Ve'ika da Amre, and there are those, however, who explain it and say it as follows: Kol she'isura isur erva, that we're talking about a prohibition where the prohibition is based on erva. Who the asirat sarata? That's where the co-wife is forbidden. Here in this case, lo isura isur erva. Here we're talking about situations where there is no prohibition of erva. Okay, sarata lo asira. In those situations, the co-wife is not forbidden. Okay, lamaute mai, to exclude whom? Amar Rafram, he says, lamaute tsarat ilonit udilo karabi asi. It would still come to exclude the co-wife of the ilonit, but it would not be according to the view of Rabbi Asi. Okay, going on then. Achota shehi yibamta, her sister, when she is her the yabama.
She is the
Yabama. Okay. Achota deman, asks the Gemara, the sister of whom? Okay. Ilema de isur mitzvah. Okay. If we're going to say that this is an example of an isur mitzvah, okay, which we defined earlier, right? Like a kind of erva.
This is
Okay. All right, or erva de rabbanan, we might phrase it that way, right? Okay. In any case, right, the isur mitzvah, kevan de oraita ramya kame. Okay, since it's as if it's placed on it as if it were equivalent to a Torah mandated item. Paga ba'achod zikukato. This would impact, okay, on the sister of his zikuka. Right? Ella, but rather what we're saying is achota de isur erva. But rather we must say it's his, right, her sister, where the prohibition is due to erva. Okay. Next part. Isur mitzvah shniot, where we said that the prohibition is because of shniot, all right, that rabbinical erva requirement. Amai kari la isur mitzvah. Why do we call this then the phrase isur mitzvah? Maybe it should have a different name. Okay. Amar Abaye, Abaye tries to give an explanation. Mitzvah l'shmoa divrei chachamim. Why? Because it is a command to listen to the words of the sages. In other words, the sages made it, and this decision, and they rendered them shniot la'erva, and therefore we follow that as if it were a doraita. Okay? Isur kedusha. What about the phrase isur kedusha, a prohibition based on sanctity? Like the example of almanah lekohen gadol, Okay, the widow of the Kohen Gadol's brother, Grusha v'chalutza leKohen Hedyot, or like those. Okay, va'amai karu laho isur kedusha, and why do they call these right prohibition based on sanctity? Dichtiv, why? Because we have a pasuk that tells us kedoshim yihiu leElohim, that they shall be holy to their right.
And the special
Okay,
restrictions.
so in other words, that is the beginning of the pasuk, or the pasuk of the section that defines special status of Kohen regarding who he can marry, what he can do, so on and so forth. Okay, so a level of sanctity, of special sanctity, is accorded to the Kohen, and as a result, says it would appear Abaye. That's why we call it Isur Kedusha. Okay, we're going to see that's going to be challenged shortly. Okay, by Ram. All right. Now what happens? Tanya. Okay, we have a Braita, however, that says Rebbe Yehuda Machlif. Rebbe Yehuda, however, uses the same terms, but he flips them. He flips them. Okay, what does he say? Isur mitzvah. Okay, he uses the prohibition of a mitzvah. Almana lekohen gadol ugrusha v'chalutza lekohen hedyat. Okay, va'amai kare le isur mitzvah. And why does Rebbe Yehuda call them instead isur mitzvah? Dichtiv. Why? Because we have a pasuk in Leviticus 27:34 that says Eila hamitzvot, etc., etc., etc. And both.
That's also God.
Okay, all right. Isur Kedusha. And why does Rebbe Yehuda give a different name to Isur Kedusha? Shniot midivrei sofrim. And he uses that as the example of the Erva D'Rabbanan. Okay. So the Gemara still asks, Va'amai kari le Isur Kedusha. Why did he call it that? Again, Abba Amar Abaye, says Abaye, Kol hamikayim divrei chachamim nikra kadosh. Anyone who fulfills the words of the sages is considered holy. But Rav is going to say, hold on a second, Abaye. If that, you say that, v'chol she'eino mekayim divrei chachamim, but somebody who doesn't fulfill the words of the sages, kadosh hu delo mikre, rasha nami lo mikre. Are we saying then that we don't call him holy, but we don't call him wicked either? Okay? Ella amar Rava. But rather Rava says the following. We base it on something else that says, kadesh atzmacha b'mutar lach, that you should sanctify yourself in that which is permitted to you. Namely, certain women are not permitted because of erva, certain women are permitted. Right? Based on what? On the fact that we have other psukim. All right? Almana lekohen gadol. What about that phrase? As an example, all right? Kipasik v'tane. There it's clearly, categorically spoken. That's one translation. Okay? Because we have two psukim where we have a positive commandment and we have a negative commandment. One pasuk is Rabbi Yikra 21:13, and one is 21:14. Okay? Lo shana min ha'nisu'im, v'lo shana min ha'erusim. There we say, looking at those two psukim, right? There's no difference between actual marriage and no difference between engagement. Bishlema min hanisu'in. Okay. Well, regarding the marriage,
real full marriage,
regular marriage, asay velo ta'aseh. We have an example of a positive commandment. Okay, and I'm not going to pull out the Chumash to read them. Okay, but they're there. All right.
The asay is you should do yibum. The losa.
Oh, I don't know if
is
we're
the
there, no.
Kohen
I don't
Gadol
think that-
can't marry an almana.
That's later. That's
No,
the
that's the two here.
That's the two.
we'll
All
look
right,
at we'll look at the
the
Chumash.
other assay is you should be holy.
Right, that's the
So you have two, so
You have
we're
an
gonna,
assay,
but that's gonna be the next argument.
that's the next argument. Okay, so the first is that it said they have to be holy, and then it says you can't.
That you must do yibum
Hmm.
and you can't marry an almana.
Right.
So you have an assay.
Say and
to
a low
do
tas.
yibum that
Okay,
cannot be
so you have
done
those.
to-
Ve'ein aseh doche lo ta'aseh v'aseh. And the single assay of doing yibum is not strong enough to override a combination of a lo ta'aseh and an assay regarding the example of the Kohen. Okay? Ela
So
minha,
that's if she's not a virgin.
that's
But now
a
we-
normal man.
Right, now we're gonna ask, what if she's still a virgin?
Ela minha erusin. But what about the situation of simply erusin? There, the prohibition regarding the Kohen, lo ta'aseh gredahu. That's gredahi. That's only a simple, so to speak, an ordinary love that he shouldn't have done. Yavo aseh v'yidche lo ta'aseh. There we might suggest, okay, that we have a positive commandment of doing yibum, and that would override the normal lo ta'aseh in that case.
Of an almana.
Right. Okay. So Amar Rav Gidl, says Rav Gidl, Amar Rav in the name of Rav, Amar Kra. But we have another pasuk that we're going to throw into the mix here. Va'alta yevamto hasha'ara. That pasuk says that the yevamta, she has to go to the gate, right? In other words, to the place where
There's
Yibum,
the basin
Where
is.
the
where the
basin
basin is, and where ideally chalitza would be carried out. She'ein Talmud lomar yevamto. Okay, that the text would not have used the word there yevamto.
It didn't need to use the word.
Okay, in other words, is that word superfluous or not?
It is.
Ma Talmud lomar. What is it then trying to teach us? Yevamto, with the inclusion of that word there, tells us yesh lecha yevama achat she'oleh lechalitza ve'ena oleh leyibum. That in that kind of a case, okay, right, that it tells us there is a, I'm not sure, yeah, a situation, a case or situation where you don't have a choice of doing yibum or chalitza. You only have one case, one path to follow.
It's a stretch.
Okay?
No,
Right.
it's giving her the boot.
Literally. Okay? All right. So what happens? Echad she'ola lechalitza ve'ein ola leyibum. Ve'ezo zo chayav lavin.
What is?
What
Okay.
is that?
No,
case?
now
So,
we're going
what
and
is that
saying, what were the
situation?
lavin that we were
Okay.
talking
So
about?
what are the examples of the negative, right? Lavin. Ve'ema chayav kritut. I might say maybe they are prohibitions
Only
that are identified with a punishment of kares.
which are real arayas.
Those are clearly situations of error. Amar kra, but the pasuk also says, Im lo yachpot ha'ish lakachat. Okay, if the man doesn't want to choose to take her, in other words, to marry her. Im chafetz miyabeim. If he wants her, he should fulfill it by means of yibum. Namely, kol ha'oleh liyibum, oleh lechalitza. Whoever is viable, I'm going to use the word for the moment, for yibum is also viable for chalitza. V'chol she'en oleh liyibum, and one who is not viable for yibum, eino oleh lechalitza. She doesn't merit the chalitza either. Ihachi, if that's the case, then these other examples of Lavin, of
Shmiyos, for
okay,
example,
all these others also,
are just Lavin.
right? Those which we would say were ordinary.
But the
Lavin.
key here is that if it's Chayav Krisos, then the marriage is not Tofes.
Right, we're
If
gonna
it's
get to that.
just the
We're gonna
Lav,
get to it. Hold on. We'll get to it. Okay, Ha Rabbi, okay, Ha Rabbi, here's his right? Rachmana Yivam Tov. Okay, that therefore that's why it says that the Torah spells out the word Yivam Tov to tell us this. Umara'ita, and what then are we saying here? Okay, Mistabra. It seems logical then. The following. Chai ve'lavin tafsei baho kedushin. That where we have a situation where it is an ordinary lav that's prohibited, the action, okay? Nevertheless, that marriage is tofes.
So if the
It may
Kohen Gadol
maintain.
does do Yibum, she is his wife.
It's still considered a valid legal marriage. Chai ve'krisus. But where we have a situation where the lav is punishable by karet, that lav lo tafsei baho kedushin. Then there is no valid marriage whatsoever in that situation.
But they make the Kohen divorce, so don't they?
Yeah, but it's called, he has to give her a get. It's
Yes,
not
right.
like he.
And just say
Can't just.
If the
where
Isur
the
is a
lav
law.
is a
Yeah,
karet.
man, Koren, so it's, I know.
Yeah, but it's
law
not
doesn't
kares
move.
for a Kohen to marry an almana. It's
So we have
stam
a
a law.
Kohen Gadol.
Right.
Kohen Gadol marrying an
So he gets
almana.
Koren.
No,
Right.
he does
No,
not.
no,
It's just
no.
a law.
So the law, he has to give her a
If
get.
you
Right.
try to marry your sister, that's kares.
Right.
If you're the Kohen Gadol and you marry an almana,
No,
that's
no.
just stam a
That's
law.
a stam
Well, the
law.
marriage,
But
it's
that's still a valid
Right.
marriage. So he should
Give her,
give her a get. Exactly.
well, with Koren, he doesn't have to give her. a
With
get.
kares, he just slept with her. It's not a marriage. No,
That's not right. It's
well, it was a pleasant.
it's a
evening.
problem for the Kohen Gadol, then. Right? Okay. Meitiv Rava. Now Rav is going to go through a series of efforts to explain, okay, the situation from his point of view. And I will tell you that he suggests the Gemara puts it
Pushes
aside.
on.
Then he
Few
comes back with
times.
another one, Gemara pushes it aside. Okay, so every time we see Ella Rava Amar, it tells you
The second
immediately
effort.
that's another effort on Rava's part to come up with another example. Okay, all right, so now the first attempt by Rav. Okay, so this is a challenge actually to Rav's view. Isur mitzvah, the Isur kedusha. In these two examples of prohibitions, due to either a mitzvah or sanctity.
And they're just lies.
Okay, right? Ba'aleha o chaletzela. Either he has relations with her or he does chalitza with her. Niftara sarata. Her co-wife becomes then free, right? Ve'isal gadatach. And if you're going to think, chave lavin midoraita, that these ordinary, I'm going to say lavs, okay, as in the example we saw, okay, as to the earlier case of Isur, right? Of Isur mitzvah, right? If it's right, in that case, lavin midoraita, lechalitza ramya, that they fall only allowing chalitza, liyibum lo ramya, and that they don't allow for yibum. Ki ba'aleha, when he has relations with her, amai niftarat sarata. Why then would we say that the co-wife is exempt? Who made motiv la, v'hu mefarek la. He challenged it with the question, and he comes to try to answer it
His
as
own
well.
question.
Okay? Litzdadin katani. We're talking about two different aspects, namely, he says, is what it's teaching about. Ba'aleha, when it says that he has relations with her. Ha'isur mitzvah. There we're talking about the example of prohibitions,
Yes,
okay, that he transgresses the Rabbanan. Okay, but the Torah, it's still valid, and therefore the Sarah should be exempt. All right, Chalatzla, where it talks about that example, right? Ha'isur kedusha. There we're talking about the prohibitions of sanctity, whereby the Torah situation, okay, the law is that there is no yibum, and therefore only chalitza is going to exempt the tzara. Okay, Meitiv Rava. Now, Rava says as follows. What about, so that would seem the challenge. So he wants to cite a Braita that's going to tell us as follows. Right, case this way. Patsua dacha ukrut shifcha. Okay, someone whose bodily parts are either severed or crushed. Okay,
Of different parts.
different parts, right? Okay, saris, a man who is infertile. Saris adam.
Saris is somebody who is castrated.
Right. Well,
Human by human
at
hands.
human hands. V'zahazakain, and an elderly person.
No longer
Okay,
functional.
and cannot produce an heir.
They didn't have
Okay.
the Viagra in those days.
Oh, chotzin omiyabmin. This Braita says that they can do either chalitza or yibum. Ketzad, how is that possible? Metu, okay.
Well,
Person-
first of all, we don't know who we're talking about.
We're
Whether
gonna
he's
get to
the
that.
brother or the dead brother or the living
We'll
brother.
get to it in a second, right? Metu, some they die.
Let's say he's the dead
Okay.
brother.
V'lahem achim, and they had brothers. V'lahem nashim, and they had wives. V'amdu achim v'asu ma'amar b'neshoteim, and other brothers stood up and they made a ma'amar, okay, to the wives, to the widows, right? V'natnu get v'chaltzu, okay, and they gave a get, okay,
Or chalitza.
or chalitza.
Now this, we're introducing a new notion. That
Hold
we
on,
can
hold on,
substitute
hold on. We'll get to that in just a second. Masha asu asu. What they did, they did. Ve'im ba'alu kanu. And if they had relations with them, they acquired them. Okay? So by saying that they said they gave a get, and then telling us in the Braita that if they had relations, they acquired them, we now see that we're now introducing, as Michael's suggesting, okay, the following. You need to do an act to break that status, okay? Now, the act normally we've been talking about is chalitza, but now we have the additional possibility of get to break that relationship, okay? Now, says the text going on, Meitu achim. Now we clarify, it's brothers that died. Va'amdu haim, and other brothers now stood up. Va'asu ma'amar b'nishotehem, and they made a ma'amar regarding the widows, okay? Right? V'natnu get, and they gave a get. O shechaltzu, or they did chalitza. Masha asu asu. What they did, they did. Ve'im ba'alu kanu. And if they had relations, they acquired them, right? Va'asur, says this part of the Braita. L'kaiman mishum shene'amar, but it's prohibited to continue to have them as wives, okay, and live with them. Why? Because it says, lo yavo patsua dacha, right? Right? Right, that the patsua daka should not become part of the Jewish community.
Now we're talking if the surviving brother
was a.
is the person who has one of these deficiencies,
Okay.
with
Right.
the exception of an old man, we'll say.
Okay, We're going to get to the point now. What's the
Saying with a
status?
woman, you still have to be
Right,
young.
right. What's the status of these other brothers? Okay, right? Because it says Ve'isal Kadata Chai Ve'lavin Midoraita L'Chalitza Rami. And if you think that we've said earlier that these ordinary lavin are equivalent to Torah mandated, and they only direct to
That
do.
not being able to marry if you have one of these physical
Well,
issues.
hold on, yeah.
is a-
Okay, that directs one only to chalitza, liyibum lo ramya, and that for yibum it doesn't,
tell you
it's
to
not valid. Im ba'alu, if our Braita said, if you had relations with them, amai kanu.
how did
Why
you
then how
acquire
can it say that they acquired them as wives?
Right.
Because clearly, if we're talking about men that had these physical disabilities, we already know that there's a prohibition from them entering the Jewish community.
meaning get married?
Okay? Okay. Ela Amar Rava. So fine. So the Gemara has thrown out that argument of Rava, and now he tries another argument. Rather, Rava now says as follows. Almana min ha'erusin, nami aseh velo ta'asehu. Regarding a widow, okay, from engagement, right? And that was the example we kept talking about, remember, with the Kohen Gadol, particularly, okay? There is both an aseh and a lo ta'aseh. Dichtiv, as it's written, Kedoshim yihiyu le'Eloheim, that the Kohanim have particular sanctified status. Okay, so if that's the case, that might work regarding that example. Mamzeret unatina my ikalamema. But what would you say then about our earlier, the part of our Mishnah that also referred to the mamzeret or the natina? Okay, kativ vehit kadashtem. But we have a general statement that says the entire Jewish people
Have to be holy.
have to have a sacred status. Okay, have to be holy. Ihachi, if that's the case, kol haTorah kula nami aseh velo ta'asehu. We might then argue that the entire Torah
Every
is
time
simply
there's a low
an entire collection of both positive and negative commandments.
so there can't ever be a low
Right.
saseh.
So if that's true, you'd never have a situation then of an aseh doche elot.
Shabbos, brissin.
Right? So what happens? Hachi kol haTorah kula nami aseh velo ta'asehu. Dichtiv, why? Because it's written, vehit kadashtem, that you all have to be sanctified, holy. So we get rid of that argument. Rava now tries one more time. Ela amar Rava, one more time. Gzeira almana min ha'erusin, atu almana min ha'nisuin. Maybe the rabbis made this Isur mitzvah, okay, or Isur
Why
kedusha,
he calls this
okay,
Isur mitzvah.
right? Maybe they made a gzeira, lest, okay, we think the Kohen might marry the widow of his brother only from Erusin,
Right.
and not to do it from a Nisuin, right? If that's the case, all right, are we going to say lest one do X? We prohibit X, lest one do Y.
We prohibit the virgin bride lest he
Okay,
marry
whatever.
the non-virgin.
How about mamzeret and atina my ikalamema?
Okay.
What are you going to say in regards to those cases? Are you going to argue the same kind of logic? Gezerah b'makom mitzvah, atu shelo b'makom mitzvah, that you're going to make a decree, okay, in regards to the one case, the mitzvah issues, lest
Expand
what's
to
to
a
do it
non-mitzvah.
non-mitzvah issues. Ela me'ata, but rather from here, Eshet achiv me'aviv lo tityabem. If that's the case, then here we would say the wife of one's paternal brother,
You should never do.
one would
yibum.
not be doing yibum for. Gezerah mishum eshet achiv me'imo. Lest one say, okay, he might do a yibum for the wife of his maternal brother,
Which you can't do.
which we know that's not part of the laws of yibum. Why? Yibum benachalat ala rachmana miyada yadeya. Why? Because people all know that yibum is based on a common aspect of nachalat, of paternity, and not through maternity. Okay? People know. Okay, if that's the case,
New rule.
all right, Isha she'en labanim lo titbayabem. That a woman who doesn't have children, maybe she should not have yibum. All right. Somebody asked this, by the way, the other day, a similar question to this. It was, what happens? Somebody said, you asked me, right? If a woman had been married before she had a child, and she married somebody, and then that's what you asked me, right? That was, all right, and I told you we would get to something similar to that in today's daf. Okay, so here's that case, all right? Do we say here, all right, that the woman, she doesn't have children. Are you going to say you don't do yibum for her? Gezerah mishum isha sheyesh labani. Lest it be a situation where you have a woman who does have children. Bebanim tala rachmana mida yadia. But with regards to progeny, the Torah spells it out that it's got to be from him, not from her. Okay, Sid, that
Women
was
are irrelevant.
no, not irrelevant. The point.
Oh, he's chayven for a vote. She's not
Right.
chayven
That's
for a
correct.
vote.
That's
That's
why women
fine.
are irrelevant.
Okay.
They're just wombs.
Irrelevant.
Okay.
Women
Now,
are just wombs.
all right. Eshet achiv shaya ba'olamo lo tityabem. Now we come back to this earlier case. Okay, the wife of his brother who was not in existence with him at the same time. Maybe in that case, you're going to say she doesn't get the yibum. Gzeira mishum isha eshet achiv shelo haya be'olamo b'yeshiva.
We should never.
Right? Be'olamo. Okay.
Period.
Right? Just stop there. Right? Lest he do it with a woman, right? Right? Shelo haya be'olamo b'yeshiva talarachmana. Dwelling at the same time, the Torah is miyeda yadia. Okay, that the Torah identified it, that they had to be in existence at the same time. Okay, let's go on a little bit. Kol hanashim lo tityabamna. Maybe we might argue, perhaps all women,
Never have you,
okay, shouldn't have yibum.
which is what we argued today.
Right.
Let's respond.
Zera mishum ilonit, lest, right, it be a situation of his marriage of a woman we don't know if she can produce children. The Elonit. Lo shchicha, says the Gemara. That case is not common. And we know that supposedly the rabbis did not make zeras in non-common situations. Okay? Mamzeret unatina nami lo shchicha. But we might argue that a situation to marry a mamzeret or a nitina is also not common. Ela Amar Rava. So here again, Rava attempts to give an alternative explanation one more time. Gezerah bia rishona. Perhaps the rabbis made the decree because of the initial conjugal relations. Atu bia shnia, lest it lead to further conjugal relations.
Which is no longer the mitzvah.
Then you don't fulfill, you're not fulfilling the mitzvah of yibum, you're doing it for other reasons. Okay? Tanya nami hachi, and we learn as follows, the bright. Im ba'alu kanu b'bia rishona. Okay, if they had relations, he acquired her with a first act, va'asur lekaiman b'bia shniya, and it's prohibited then to continue with further relations. Hadar amar Rav, but here the Gemara says, hold on a second, Rav seems to have recanted this last view. All right, V'itema Rav Ashi, and others say it was Rav Ashi who shows that last perspective is not appropriate. Okay, Lav miltehi da amre. Okay, that's not what we're saying here. Da amar Reish Lakish, as says Reish Lakish, kol makom she'ata motzei aseh v'lo ta'aseh. When you find an occasion, a situation in the Torah, where you have both a positive and a negative, as was our case with the Kohen Gadol, for example, right? If you're able to satisfy both of them, noch besser. Okay? All the
That
better.
means you do chalitza.
Right? That's what the Gemara is going to tell us shortly. Ve'im lav yavo aseh v'yidche et lo taseh. And if not, then the aseh will come and override the lo taseh. Hacha, here in this case, hachanami, here in this case also, efshar b'chalitza the mekayem aseh v'lo taseh. It's possible to both fulfill through doing chalitza, both the aseh and the lo taseh. Now I'm going to suggest we
read to the next 4 words.
Right? Meitive, but says the Gemara, we challenge this. It says
Pasuk says,
right?
No,
The Bryce. V'im ba'alu kanu.
He could marry her.
We can marry her and acquire tiyufta. This seems to be a proof text that you didn't again that Rava's view still would hold in that argument.
And you don't always require chalitza instead of.
So we will pick up tomorrow on the next to the last line there, because it continues, but it moves a different.
The real essay is Hebrew.
Correct.
Well,
I understand. Sure.
No, the real
I understand.
essay is one or the other, but different times in history, they preferred one
But
over
the
the other.
text is
Charlie, we argued.
It's not, the text is that the notion
I understand.
of doing the.
We argued that through the whole first paragraph.
Right, that's the.
Whether we could really argue that Yibum was the only mitzvah,
And the
Okay.
Mishnah begins.
and Chalitza
Well,
was
The
just,
word, it begins,
but the Mishnah,
I understand.
Remember the first
I'm just throwing
Mishnah
it out.
put chalitza first.
or whether.
Sarah says prefer.
Sorry, everybody.
You know why? You're not.